My uncle sent me a video that changed everything. In it, my family was calling me a worthless burden, even though I'd been covering their mortgage for years. They insisted she owes us. I said nothing and acted normal until the next payment was due. But when that video hit my inbox, my world tilted. There they were. My parents and my brother Thomas, gathered around our old kitchen table in Phoenix, discussing me like I was nothing more than a drain on their resources. The familiar Arizona sun streamed through the windows, its warm glow mocking the cold, harsh words being exchanged. Lindsay only helps because she owes us, my mother sneered, her voice thick with disdain. After everything we've done for her, paying the mortgage is the least she can do. Thomas smirked and added, yeah, and she acts like she's doing us a huge favor. What a joke. But the worst was my father's silent nod of agreement. The same man who once taught me to ride a bike and helped with my math homework now sat there, letting them tear me down. The video was shaky, clearly recorded without their knowledge, yet every word was crystal clear. I watched it 3 times, each viewing mixing numbness with painful clarity. For the past 4 years, I had been making significant mortgage payments through my LLC, Divine Investments. They believed they were paying a bank, never bothering to read the fine print my financial advisor helped set up. Every month, they chipped in a small amount while I covered the bulk, and still complained about my minimal help. Then came a message from Uncle Jason. You needed to see this, Lindsay. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. They've been talking like this for months. I sat in my home office, staring at spreadsheets that detailed every payment I'd made. The numbers didn't lie. Over $200,000 had gone into keeping them comfortable in that house. Instead of shaking with anger, my hands remained steady as I pulled up the mortgage agreement. A small smile tugged at my lips as I remembered the purchase option clause my advisor had insisted on including, just in case. Looking back, I wonder if she ever suspected something like this would happen. With the next payment due in 2 weeks, I finally knew what to do. I texted my uncle, thank you for showing me the truth. Don't worry, I won't let them know you sent this, but things are about to change. I've always been the family safety net, even if they'd never admit it. 4 years ago, when the Phoenix housing market crashed and they were on the brink of losing their home, I stepped in. I was 27 then, already successful as a software development manager. Ironically, they never approved of my career choice. They wanted me to take over Dad's struggling real estate business instead. Software isn't a real career for a woman, my mother would say, pursing her lips in disapproval. Your brother Thomas has real business sense. Yet Thomas, with all his so-called talent, nearly bankrupted the family company within 2 years of taking over. When they needed help with the mortgage, I consulted Kate, my financial advisor. She suggested a creative solution: form an LLC, buy the house through it, and let them think they were still dealing with a bank. That way, I'd protect myself legally while helping them. It was perfect. I could support them without bruising their pride. So Divine Investments LLC became the mortgage holder, and I secretly covered the rest of the payments while they maintained their dignity. Uncle Jason was the only one in the loop, having overheard Kate and me discussing it at a family gathering. You're too good to them, Lindsay, he had said. They don't deserve your kindness. Of course, I defended them. They were my family. They might not understand my choices, but they had always given me a home. Now, watching that video for the 4th time, I realized just how wrong I'd been. Their words played over and over in my mind. She owes us, what a joke. The least she can do. Each phrase was like a knife twisting deeper. I opened my laptop and logged into the LLC's account. The next mortgage payment was due on the 15th, just 2 weeks away. They had never been late before, always transferring their share like clockwork. But now, knowing how they really felt, I had no intention of covering the rest. This time, they'd have to face the consequences of their ingratitude. They had no idea that the worthless burden was actually their landlord. The thought brought a small, satisfied smile. Sometimes karma needs a little push. But the video wasn't the only piece of evidence. The next day, Uncle Jason sent more proof, screenshots of a family group chat I had been deliberately excluded from. They created it 6 months ago, naming it Family Finances. Each message felt like another betrayal. Lindsay thinks she's so special with her tech job. One message read, she barely helps with the mortgage while I'm here running Dad's business, said another. My mother's response made my blood run cold. We should ask her for more money. She's single, no kids. What else is she spending on? After all we sacrificed to raise her, she can't even properly support the family. I pulled up my financial records, hands trembling as I recalculated everything I'd contributed over the past 4 years. $267,800 toward their mortgage through Divine Investments, while they'd only paid $52,500. They believed their $1,100 monthly payments to the bank were the main installments, unaware I was covering an extra $5,400 every month. Then my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Sweetie, can you come to dinner this Sunday? We need to discuss something important. I knew exactly what that something would be. They were planning to ask for more money, likely wrapped in emotional manipulation and guilt trips. The thought of sitting there, pretending not to know how they really felt about me, made my stomach churn. I called Kate, needing to know my options with the purchase agreement. I have a feeling you might, she said, not at all surprised. Remember that clause we included? If they miss a payment, Divine Investments can exercise the purchase option immediately. The house becomes yours outright, and they become month-to-month tenants. A plan began forming in my mind. If they were late on rent, under standard Arizona eviction laws, I'd be within my rights to give them notice. She paused. Lindsay, are you sure you want to go this route? I thought about years of condescension, being the family ATM while they mocked me behind my back. I remembered Thomas running Dad's business into the ground while they praised his business sense. Every snide remark about my career and my supposed obligations flashed before me. Yes, I replied steadily, I'm sure. But I won't tell them a thing. Let them think everything's normal for now. I texted my mother back. Of course, I'll be at dinner. Looking forward to it. The heart emoji felt ironic but necessary. After all, they taught me well. Sometimes the best revenge is keeping a perfect poker face. The next mortgage payment was due in 13 days. And for the first time since this arrangement began, I wouldn't be there to catch them when they fell. Sunday dinner felt like an exercise in self-control. I arrived at their Phoenix home right at 6 o'clock, the setting sun painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. The house, my house technically, looked just as it had for the past 20 years. The familiar aroma of my mother's lasagna filled the air, a calculated reminder of happier times. Lindsay, sweetheart, my mother greeted me, rushing to hug me. Her new designer bracelet caught the light. I noticed it was new, probably bought with money that should have gone toward their mortgage, which was due in 9 days. Thomas sat at the dining table, looking smug in his pressed business casual attire. Hey sis, good of you to make time for your family. I smiled, thinking of his earlier remark about how I barely helped. If only he knew his entire lifestyle depended on my generosity. I always have time for family, I replied, the irony thick in my throat. My father emerged from his study, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed papers that turned out to be bank statements. The sight nearly made me laugh. They were already rehearsing their pitch before dinner even began. My mother started, we need to talk about something important. She glanced at my father, who nodded encouragingly. Of course, I said, serving myself a portion. What's on your mind? Thomas cleared his throat. Well, as you know, Dad's business has been facing some challenges. The real estate market isn't what it used to be. I took a bite of lasagna, chewing slowly as my mother continued, reaching across the table to take my hand. We're so blessed to have such a successful daughter. Your father and I sacrificed so much to give you a good education. I watched her carefully. Her gentle reminders of our sacrifices were as calculated as they were condescending. The mortgage payment has become quite a burden, Dad added, his tone that all too familiar paternal authority that always made me feel small. And with you doing so well in your tech career, software development, I interjected automatically, even though they'd never bothered to understand the difference. Right, he waved dismissively. We thought maybe you could help more with the monthly payments. After all, this is your family home too. They had no idea how much of it was already mine. We're only asking for an extra $2,000 a month, my mother quickly added. It wasn't much compared to your salary, she insisted. I took another bite of lasagna, holding my composure. They wanted an extra $2,000 when they didn't even know I was already paying over $5,000. The audacity was almost impressive. I'll think about it, I said finally, keeping my tone neutral. Times are uncertain right now. Thomas scoffed, please, we all know you're doing fine. Unlike some of us who are actually working hard to keep this family's legacy alive. I smiled inwardly, imagining the bank's notification when they missed their payment next week. You're right, Thomas. Sometimes we all get exactly what we deserve. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom but deliberately took a detour past my father's study. The door was ajar, and I could hear my parents and Thomas talking in hushed tones. I paused, my heart pounding as I caught snippets of their conversation. She's not going to help, Thomas said bitterly. Did you see how she just sat there, acting all superior with her tech job while our business is? I stopped listening as the truth settled in. The worthless burden was about to turn the tables on them. And nothing would ever be the same again. With a strained patience, my father said. We have another option. Remember those investment documents I discovered in her cloud storage last month, when she was using our Wi-Fi? She's been hiding money in a company called Divine Investments. My blood ran cold. I remembered how they'd snooped through my files during my last visit when I carelessly logged in without a VPN, and my cloud storage automatically synced. I looked it up immediately. He continued, it's a legitimate LLC, and it's doing very well. She's been squirreling away money there instead of actually helping the family. I raised an eyebrow. Then my mother chimed in. We'll give her one more chance to help voluntarily. If not, I'll remind her of that time in college when she took money from your business account for her tuition. She thought we never knew, but we have proof. She had to help us. I bit my lip to suppress my laughter. The money they mentioned? I had actually borrowed it, with Dad's permission, when my tuition check bounced, and I repaid it within a month with interest. I have emails that prove it. Their attempted blackmail was as pathetic as it was desperate. And if that doesn't work, Thomas added, we can always contact her company's HR department. question her mental stability, and maybe even suggest she's been stealing company resources for personal projects. The casual way they discussed sabotaging my career sent a chill down my spine. These weren't family, they were parasites hiding behind a family mask. Quietly, I slipped back to the bathroom, flushed the toilet for show, and then returned to the dining room. Moments later, they filed back in, all wearing rehearsed smiles. "Lindsay, dear," my mother cooed. "Have you given any thought to what we discussed about contributing more to the mortgage?" I met her gaze steadily. "Actually, I have. You're right, family should help family. I'll have an answer for you in about 8 days. The timing wasn't random. Their mortgage payment was due in 8 days, and I knew exactly what would happen when they missed it. Divine Investments would finally reveal its true ownership." Thomas frowned. "Why such a specific timeline?" I stood gathering my purse. "I just need to check a few things with my financial advisor. You understand, being careful with money is just good business sense." I smiled at Thomas as I echoed their favorite phrase. My mother walked me to the door, pulling me into another calculated hug. "We knew you'd understand, sweetheart. Family always comes first." "Yes," I agreed inwardly, already thinking of the eviction notice I drafted. Family always gets exactly what they deserve. As I drove home, I called Uncle Jason. "You were right about them," I said when he answered. "But don't worry. I'm done playing the silent partner in their little drama. It's time for the final act." The week dragged by. My family kept up their pressure campaign with daily texts about their urgent financial situation, each message only fueling my resolve. I forwarded every text to Kate, my financial advisor, who was helping me prepare for the inevitable confrontation. "Everything's ready," Kate confirmed during our meeting 3 days before the payment was due. "Once they miss it, Divine Investments can immediately exercise its purchase option. I've also prepared the eviction notices, just in case." I nodded while reviewing the documents. "And you're sure everything's legally sound?" "They can't fight this. They signed the agreement 4 years ago," Kate assured me. "Your father barely even read it. He was too desperate for a bailout. Everything's perfectly legal." That evening, my brother attacked via text. "Hey sis, I was just talking to a friend in tech. Recruitment. Heard some companies are doing layoffs. Must be scary for you, but at least you have family to fall back on. Speaking of which, about that help we discussed." Their manipulation was so transparent it was almost comical. I showed the message to Uncle Jason over coffee the next day. "They never change," he said, shaking his head. "Your aunt and I watched them do this to everyone in the family. That's why we distanced ourselves years ago." "Did you know they went through my files when I visited?" I asked, not surprised. "They did the same to your cousin when she stayed here last year. They're always looking for leverage." He paused, then asked, "Are you ready for the fallout?" "They won't take this well." I thought about their threats to contact my company's HR, their plans to blackmail me, and all those years of taking my help while mocking me behind my back. "I'm ready," I replied firmly. They made their choice. Now they'll face the consequences. 2 days before the payment was due, my mother called. "Lindsay, we need your answer about the mortgage help. Times are tough and family needs to stick together." "Don't worry, Mom," I said evenly. "Everything will be clear very soon." That night, an email from the family's bank arrived. They had tried to transfer money from their account to Divine Investments, but the payment bounced. They were already overdrawn. I forwarded the notification to Kate. "Here we go," she replied. "Do you want me to start the proceedings tomorrow?" I thought about that lasagna dinner, the smug looks, the casual discussion of ruining my career. I recalled the years of manipulation, the constant demands, the endless ingratitude. I typed back, "Let's wait until the payment officially fails. Let them spend the next 2 days thinking everything's fine." They taught me well, timing is everything. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to my company's HR department, documenting my family's threats and including all the evidence Uncle Jason had gathered. Better to get ahead of their potential attacks. The end was in sight, and I wasn't leaving anything to chance. I muttered to myself, the best revenge is letting people face the consequences of their own actions. At exactly 9 a.m., the payment deadline came and went. Divine Investments' automated system sent out its default notice. I stared at my phone, counting down the seconds until the inevitable call. It took exactly 12 minutes. "Lindsay." My mother's voice was frantic. "Something's wrong with our mortgage payment. The bank says we've defaulted, but that's impossible. We need your help immediately." "Actually," I replied calmly, "Divine Investments isn't a bank, it's an LLC. My LLC, to be specific." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, she whispered, "Check your email. You'll find a notice explaining that due to your default, Divine Investments is exercising its purchase option. The house is now legally mine. Your status has been changed to month-to-month tenants." This is a joke," she stammered. "No joke," I said. "I've been covering most of your mortgage for 4 years while you mocked me behind my back, called me a burden, plotted to blackmail me, and even threatened my career. How did you—" Uncle Jason showed me the video. He showed me everything. "Now about your tenancy. Your first rent payment is due in 30 days. I suggest you start looking for somewhere else to live." Suddenly, my father's voice broke in. They put me on speaker. You ungrateful, careful, I cut him off. Is that any way to talk to your landlord? The eviction notice is ready. Don't make me serve it sooner than planned. I ended the call and blocked their numbers. Within minutes, my email was flooded with messages from distant relatives and family friends, accusing me of cruelty and insisting that family should forgive family. I deleted every single one without a second glance. Some debts just can't be repaid with forgiveness. 3 months later, I stood in the empty house, my footsteps echoing through vacant rooms. My family had finally moved out the previous week, forced to downsize to an apartment across town. They tried everything: threats, guilt trips, legal challenges, but the documents were ironclad. They had no choice but to accept reality. Thomas's attempt to contact my company's HR had backfired spectacularly. Thanks to my preemptive documentation and Uncle Jason's evidence, his accusations were dismissed immediately. Instead, his actions were reported to his real estate board, triggering an ethics investigation that effectively ended his career. Then came my mother's final manipulation, a tear-filled voicemail asking, "How could you do this to your own family?" The answer was simple. They had shown me exactly what family meant to them, and I finally believed it. I walked through the kitchen where it all began, the same table where they'd sat, calling me worthless while I paid their bills. The irony wasn't lost on me. Later that day, Uncle Jason and his wife were coming over to help me prepare the house for sale. The proceeds would fund a foundation for victims of financial abuse. After all, something good had to come from this. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Just heard from their lawyer. They're finally signing the last papers. It's really over. I smiled as I looked around the empty house one last time. They taught me that family always comes first, but they never specified which family. I chose my own, and for the first time in years that felt exactly right.